Hello, my name's Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So I've recently finished reading Own the World by Andrew Craig, and I thought it was such a great book that I wanted to share some of my key takeaways from the book. I thought this book was really beginner friendly, so perfect if you don't know anything about investing, but there was a few little nuggets of information in there that I didn't know, and I've been investing now for around about 3 years. It was also a really encouraging book that made you feel excited about your future and excited about investing. So if that sounds interesting, then please keep watching. I actually listened to this book on Audible. I think it was narrated by Andrew Craig himself, and the narration was really lovely because I know that sometimes it can put you off a book if the narration on Audible is not very good, but I managed to listen to it very happily on long car journeys and while I was wandering around the house, so very happy with it on Audible. So what I'm going to do is go through it chronologically in order from chapter to chapter, and I'm going to read out a few of the quotes that I found to be particularly insightful or interesting, and then just add my view on it, my experience on it, and then also how it might help you with your investing, your saving, your retirement, all of those good things. So the first section that I wanted to share with you is actually in chapter 2, and it's actually a quote from Alexander Green's book, Gone Fishing Portfolio. And it says, "No one cares more about your money than you do. With a basic understanding of the investment process and a bit of discipline, you're perfectly capable of managing your own money. By managing your own money, you'll be able to earn higher returns and save many thousands in investment costs over your lifetime." So I thought this was a really encouraging quote, and this is certainly something that I found for myself. So I started investing for myself around about 3 years ago, and I started investing in funds. And obviously no one cared more about my money than me. I wanted to save and I wanted to invest and to have a nest egg saved for the future. It also meant that I could avoid heavy fees. For example, I didn't employ a financial advisor to advise me on my investments. I just read around the subject and did as much research as I could, and I've seen huge returns from the money that I've invested, and I've been so happy with it. Obviously this can be a little bit risky because I'm not an expert and I am very much a DIY investor doing it for myself. I think a person like me is who this book is really aimed at. It's really aimed at empowering the DIY investor to take charge of your finances and to start investing and learning as much as you can about finances. So this book is a really good starting point for that. And then Andrew Craig goes on to say, "The reason many people have come to believe the stock market is a casino is simply that most people know nothing at all or incredibly little about it. Amazingly, this includes many of the people investing in it. This is why average investment performance numbers are of no use to you, and you should ignore them. A top sprinter who can run 100 metres in under 10 seconds doesn't care that the average adult human can run it in tens of seconds. The fact that there are a large number of slow people bringing down the mathematical average has no impact at all on the professional athlete's ability to run at his or her own speed." So I thought this was really inspiring. This bit actually did make me laugh out loud. I don't know if it was meant to be funny, but I found it very funny, and this is a real good example of how the book is very easy to listen to, and at points did make me have a little laugh. So there's a really great chapter in this book called Creating Financial Surplus, and this is obviously about having more money available to you so that you can invest more money, and I think this is the part that a lot of people find very difficult. I personally found it very difficult to start investing until after we bought our house, because obviously we were saving for a deposit for many years, and it's only really been in the last 3 years that we've been able to invest. So from the Creating Financial Surplus chapter, he says, "If you cannot save money given your current living arrangements, then change them. This will put you into a position to save money far more quickly than trying to buy fewer things, spend less in the pub, or drinking fewer cappuccinos every day. That said, self-storage has been one of the fastest growing industries in the last decade, and the average Briton has more than a ton of unwanted possessions. If you think about the amount of useless stuff you've purchased, it may surprise you how much you could have invested instead." Fans of the 1990s television show Sex and the City may remember an episode where the lead character Carrie can't afford the deposit on her apartment but realises she owns tens of thousands of dollars worth of shoes. Please don't be that person. So obviously in this section, I really enjoyed the quote from Sex and the City because I binge watched that years ago. Obviously, within this quote, he's trying to get across a bigger point, and that is that you really do need to try and reduce your costs so that you can invest. So an example of where we did this is we rented a flat in London for years that was very, very small and very, very cheap, considering it was the London rental market. Now, it wasn't a flat that I particularly wanted to live in. There was no dining area, nowhere to sit. It was basically just 2 rooms. It was more like a studio, to be perfectly honest. And the garden was actually just an area to put the bins out. So it wasn't a particularly nice place, but our rent was much lower and meant that we could save that extra money to put towards a deposit and hopefully get out there sooner. We ended up being there for years, but we did make it happen and we did save money, so that was brilliant. Also, I think obviously in this quote there's a nod to minimalism and the amount of possessions that we all currently own. It can be so easy to overbuy at the moment. For example, with Amazon, especially the app, you can just literally think, oh, I need that thing, and then just order it and it'll be at your door the next day. And I think that often these things end up in random drawers because you don't actually use them or need them. So he's basically questioning whether all the possessions that you have are necessary, and also saying if you could change your living situation so that you can save money, that would be really, really helpful too. I do understand that that's obviously not suitable for some people, but it was something that we personally decided to do and have a very cheap rental flat. So the next bit that he goes into is actually about property, and I do get the impression from reading this book in its entirety that Andrew Craig is not such a fan of investing in property. He obviously says, he doesn't say don't do it, it's not the right thing to do, but there are quite a few sections where he talks about potentially the returns being higher from investing elsewhere, and also that investing in property can be particularly cumbersome. So this is one of those quotes. So he says, property is a liquid and comes with a heavy administrative burden. There is another key point to bear in mind here. Property generates a great deal more work than nearly all other investments. It's very liquid and costly to buy and sell. Transactions take a long time with larger numbers of payments due to lawyers, surveyors, real estate agents and the government, while the real return is around about 2.5%. He's based those on current figures or when this book was published, which was a couple of years ago, I believe. So the next bit is about the importance of planning for your future and planning your own pension. He says the simple fact is that we can't afford to pay for society's pension and healthcare requirements the way we have for the last 2 decades. There are just too many retired and retiring people compared to productive workers. If you are below the age of about 50 and want to have enough wealth to live on in the future, then you will have to make your own provision for the future. This is something I've really started doing. So I have got a self-invested pension, which I am investing in regularly for myself. And before that, when I wasn't self-employed, I had company pensions as well. So I think it's just the realisation here and a bit of information about how it will actually be quite difficult, if not impossible, to live off the pension that will be provided by the government by the time you're allowed to get it, which for me will probably be around 67. So just giving you a bit of information about planning for the future. He does go into much more detail on retirement, but that was a kind of key point that I thought was important to include in this video. Interestingly, he also talks about whether you should prioritise your investment ISA or whether you should prioritise your pension, or SIPP actually, because obviously company pensions are very different. He goes into a little bit of detail around why he thinks you should be investing in your ISA as a priority over your SIPP. And he says, few people remember that former Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown changed the tax treatment of dividends in pensions accounts in 1997. This resulted in £5 billion less per year for holders of pension accounts. Even more recently, in March 2015, the then Conservative Chancellor George Osborne reduced the lifetime pension allowance in his budget speech, moving an estimated £600 million from pensioners to the public coffers. This lifetime allowance has been reduced from 1.8 million in 2012 to 1 million in 2016, having come down via 1.5 million and 1.25 million Each time the threshold is reduced, the government is effectively taking money from people who have had the self-discipline to save and invest wisely. So he then goes on to explain that potentially it might be better to be investing in your ISA because potentially that money is less likely to be redistributed by the government. I think this is obviously speculative and it's not based on anything that's happening at the moment, but I just thought it was a really interesting point, and I have decided I will do a separate video on this because he does go into much more detail and it's really interesting. So if you fancy seeing that video, then please do subscribe to this channel because it will be up in the next few weeks. Moving very quickly on to diversification, which we all know is very important, but it was really nice to see some information on this in the book. He says, about owning a wide cross-section of investments, famous investor Harry Brown has said, over broad periods of time, the winning investments add more value to the portfolio than the losing investments take away. Meanwhile, award-winning British wealth manager Tim Price has called diversification the only free lunch in investing. As I said in the first section of this book, I think the best thing to do is invest with the smartest investors in the world, or failing that, invest like them. So he goes on in his book to talk about how you should have a diverse portfolio and the mix that he thinks is right. So obviously we all know that diversity is really important. I try to have a diverse portfolio. I have lots of different funds, ETFs, trusts, as well as a few individual stocks and shares. I prefer to have the diversity within funds, ETFs and trusts in my investment ISA because obviously diversity overall makes your portfolio much less risky and you can still get really, really high returns even if you have a very diverse portfolio. He also then goes on to talk about some of the experts that have done particularly well in the investing field over the years and how diversification has been key to their outstanding performance. So those are a few quotes from How to Own the World by Andrew Craig. Those are a rundown of my absolute favourites. As I was listening to it on Audible, I was recording clips of all of the bits that I thought might be interesting to share. If there's anything that you want me to go into greater detail on, then please do let me know. I have popped a link to Andrew Craig's How to Own the World book down below if you're interested in reading it. I would definitely recommend it, and I would also say that the Audible version was really, really easy listening, and it made me feel excited about investing, and it made me want to plan for my future and made things like pensions seem more interesting, to be perfectly honest, and he talked about them in a really, really engaging way. So I hope you found this video interesting. It would mean the world if you fancy liking and subscribing to this channel because I will be here with lots more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.